they take drawing number 1 and 3, and I would have to make drawing number 2 in between the 2 drawings, and then between 3 and 5, I would make drawing number 4, so on and so forth. Very labor intensive. We had to really chisel out these drawings, especially because it was a close-up of a lady, and she was such a cute character that the precision work was unbelievable, really. And as an apprentice in-betweener, at 24 frames a second, if you ever watch that scene again, if you blink your eyes real fast, 24 times in a second, you'll see my drawing.
But it became Tangled, and that picture to me was probably one of the most successful pieces of character animation in a CG film, because you had Glenn Keane, who basically, he was the executive producer, so he could get anything he wanted to on that movie. And so he basically drew over every single shot that was being done. And they even went in and developed a department to sculpt these characters, so you had straights against curves, the way we would draw a character on a piece of paper. And he pushed every pose, he pushed every arc in every pose. He was putting in 2D thinking, he was putting in stronger silhouette value, he was putting in stronger squash and stretch, he was putting in stronger change of shape. And it showed. I mean, it was the most impressive thing I ever saw. Milt Kahl was a fine example. Milt Kahl could animate humans better than anybody I know. And he made a statement one time that he said that he animated humans in ways that real humans couldn't move.
And that's what we see as
and making it convincing. Yeah, and making it convincing. And when you kind of read between the lines there, it's meaning a little bit more squash and stretch, a little bit more weight, a little bit more silhouette value, a little bit more change of shape, squash and stretch and things like that, without making it look too cartoony, but making it look convincing.
All right, well, the first time I think they had me do stuff for a CG film was on Frozen. And they asked if I would do some animation tests on some of the characters. They had cast a voice for Anna, and they wanted to do a test with her to kind of explore her acting and her personality. The thing that made me realize how important that was when I animated the test. By the way, you can see it on my Tumblr page. Anyway, or YouTube or someplace else, and you should. Anyway, I did just a few tests for him, but when I did that first test, I started getting emails from the CG animators about how much they were inspired by that piece of animation, and how now they were excited to work on the movie. And they weren't too sure about it, but once they saw my animation, they got excited about it. And that made me feel really good, because I felt like if the very least I can do is get people excited to work on a project by the work that I do, get people excited about the project, then I've done something good. So for me, that was kind of the big reward in the initial stages of this experiment that Disney's done, having 2D animators work on behind the scenes on these CG films. I agree with Dale that I think Glenn's input on Tangled made a difference in the film. As somebody who was trained by him back on Aladdin, I saw Glenn's fingerprints all over that film, and I thought I think it's what helped make it stand out. I think most of the CG animators would agree that he had a good influence on the film and helped them to become better animators. And the level of animation, character animation on the Disney films has kind of been elevated since that time because of things that Glenn taught them as animators. And I understood that too, because he taught me how to animate too. I was told I can mention the film that we're working on, because it's out there. Moana is the film that we're working on, and we're having some fun working on that, developing these characters in the early stages, and now they're starting to move into production, and things will change a little bit about our role. But it was fun for me to animate Dwayne Johnson doing the character of Maui, and being able to kind of just, this is my take on it. This is how I would approach Maui. Now, the supervising animator can take or leave whatever he wants from that, but at least I got a moment to express myself. And as an artist, that's a special kind of moment when you're just doing things the way you would approach it, and putting it out there for people to see. You'll have to wait 1.5 years to see that on my Tumblr page after the movie comes out. But I've done a few tests, and one of the things that I noticed that did influence the way things were done is the character of Moana, a Polynesian girl, has had a very tight curl to her hair, and as we studied live action, we noticed that it didn't really react a lot to wind, but the animators wanted to see her hair in a more artistic way and not just a realistic way, and so they had me animate some shots where her hair was blowing in the wind, or where she was, also another thing you don't do in CG is have a character touch their hair, right? So they wanted me to do some shots where she was, pulling her hair and doing different things with her hair so that they could show it to the technical people and say, we need her to be able to do this, and we want to have control over this. So we'll see Moana do things differently than other characters in terms of how much she can interact with her hair, which in CG is a really tough thing. We do it naturally in hand-drawn.
Well, first of all, also I'd like to give a shout out to, there's a number of Disney animators who have infiltrated the audience. Yes. The person next to you could be a Disney animator and you don't know it. So, yeah.
Stand up if you're a Disney animator.
Okay. Or former Disney animator. There you go. Okay. Floyd, stand up. Stand up. There you go. Tony Bancroft, the director of Mulan, and Rick Farmelo, who animated LeFou, Gaston's little friend in Beauty and the Beast. And I don't know the newer guys, I know the older guys. So I'm sorry. All right, yeah.
I know you guys.
Yeah, what's that?
I know you guys.
Oh, you know, okay, there you go. So, yeah, I mean, I started in animation when the most technologically advanced thing we had was an electric pencil sharpener. It's like, you don't have to turn the crank, Although at Disney's, they had a lot of crank, pencil sharpeners at that time. So it's like 75, like that. And they were just starting to get the first color Xerox machine. That was a big deal. And then, slowly we watched the evolution of computer graphics and how it sort of overwhelmed, and just not just animation, but Hollywood media itself. Around the time of Pixar, they finally kind of, worked out the workflow where you say, okay, take an artist and a tech, and an artist and a tech, and let the artists be artists and let the techs be techs, and let them complement one another instead of trying to supplant one another's talents. And I think that's the kind of solution that worked. Was being able to take these generations and take what's the strongest in both. Ollie Johnston was great for small principles. Like he wasn't as vociferous as some of the other animators were, but I find a lot of the things he's told me, stay with you. And one of the things he said was, everybody's trying to copy reality. He says Disney animation is not copying live action or real life. He says Disney animation is a caricature of life. It's life plus. It's a little more, That's why the Seven Dwarfs are more interesting to look at than Snow White, And Cinderella, beautiful animation, but you really like the mice, the cat, and Bibbidi Bobbidi Boom. That's what you watch. So it's the characters that are pushed a little bit.
There's both. There's room for both. Also, I think that a lot of people have never really lost their passion for 2D. It's always been around, so it isn't like it's disappeared or anything. And there's some great 2D films in Europe that are going on, currently and recently. So that's really nice to see. They're carrying the torch there. But I'd like to see more people do it here. It's a lot of fun. That's why I got into it, because I love to draw. So that's what I want to pass along. Is to be able to get your ideas down on paper and work things out. Whether you're going to do it for 2D or CG. If you're going to use it for CG, it comes in really handy. If you're going to do little thumbnail sketches and work it out and make it really get the clarity and the performance and the aesthetics of it, then go ahead and amplify that to CG. You can do both either way, 2D or CG.
And my dad told me, I said, I want to be a cartoonist. and my dad said, get a scholarship or join the Navy. So I got a scholarship, which is great, And it's funny because after working at Disney's and DreamWorks and everything, after 20 years, when I started teaching at USC, my mother, rest her soul, looked at me and she goes, "You're a teacher now. That's a job. That's a real job."
So for me, it was always Disney. But when I got close to the point where I could get a job at Disney, it scared me to death, and I decided to go to Filmation instead and do Saturday morning cartoons. Because honestly, I didn't think I could qualify for it. And as far as getting into this business, I feel a little unfair because I came in at a time when nobody wanted to get into the business.
Yeah.
I started in 1970. I walked into my first job. I called the Filmation on Friday and walked in on my first job on Monday morning. And when I started at Disney 7 months later on the training program, there was just 2 of us, Ted Kiersey and myself, and that was it. So I feel guilty about that, honestly.
The most significant thing that was said to me is the first time I actually knew somebody who knew Glenn Keane, and so that's how I first met him. And he had lunch with me. He was kind enough to have lunch with me and look at my portfolio. And after he looked at my portfolio, he told me there's nothing in this portfolio that could get you a job at Disney. Which could have sent me off, crying and brokenhearted and done with it. But he took that extra step and he goes, "Here's what you need to do." And he told me, go to the zoo, go to the mall, go to a park, draw. Draw people, draw animals, draw them what they're doing. Tell me a story with your drawings. And come back with that portfolio. Because what I was working at Warner Brothers TV at the time, as I had a lot of character designs and I had some storyboards and different things that I'd done at Tiny Toons and Animaniacs. But I didn't have life drawing. I didn't have drawing in the sense of that real classical sense of drawing in there. He wanted to see that I could really draw. And so I did. And he said, "Come back and see me in 6 months." So when I came back in 6 months, I spent that 6 months. Every day at lunch, I'd go down to the mall, or the Warner Brothers was above a big mall, and I'd walk down to the mall and draw people trying on clothes at Gap. I'd draw people talking on this thing they used to have called a payphone. And I try to get across, if it was a teenage girl fighting with her boyfriend on the phone, I try to get across that character and that personality. And that's what I showed to him. I'd even draw from movies, and I was watching a video, I'd sketch as I watched it. And that's what I brought back to him. And because of that, then he said, "Okay, now that's what I'm looking for." And that's how I got to start at Disney. But I had to do 2 or 3 false starts before I got to that point. So, but I think in particular Eric Goldberg's 2 pieces that he did for it.
Yeah.
I think Flamingos playing with a yo-yo is a perfect piece of animation. It's flawless. He did every drawing on that piece of animation, and it is beautiful and flawless and experimental. It's got that watercolor look. I dare anybody to come up with me and say, "You know what's wrong? There's frame 327. There's a little glitch." There's no glitch. It's the most beautiful, perfect piece of animation I've ever seen, and I admire it to this day. It keeps me humble. If I ever start to get cocky about my own work, I just put that on and I realize, man, Eric, he nailed it. He showed what 2D can really be. And I think a lot depends on your generation to make sure that it doesn't die out. You as artists, you as filmmakers, if you continue to do it, it'll keep it alive. We can't draw forever, and someday we won't be here to do it, so you guys keep doing it. Okay?